Hello all and welcome to this evening's webinar on workplace bullying. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Kulin Nations on whose lands we are presenting today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. My name is Roxanne and I'm the online organiser in the OHS unit at Trades Hall, and today we are joined by Alison Ross, OHS Bullying and Harassment Officer at the ANMF. Welcome Alison.
Thank you.
All right, before we begin, I'm going to run through some housekeeping today. So we've taken a quick screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. So you should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. And you'll have the opportunity to submit any questions to either of us today by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. And you may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect these at the end and speak about them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. So if you can't see the questions area in your control pane, you may need to expand your panel by clicking on the red arrow button as seen in the screen. And you can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon on your panel, or if you'd like to ask a question, again, just enter that into the questions box mentioned before. And you'll see a blown up version of the questions box as shown in the previous slide. And of course, circled in red is the hands up button. So as you can see in the image, above the questions box is the handout box. So this box contains all the resources we'll be discussing with you today during the webinar, and they're available for you to download and keep. All you need to do is click the hyperlink of the handout and it will automatically download for you on your own desktop. And of course, I'll be sending out copies of the slides and a link to the recording in a follow-up email shortly after the presentation, so keep an eye out. So we'll start off with what is bullying. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you guys a quick little poll. So today's poll, we have the question, have you been bullied at work? And your options are yes, no, or unsure. So I'll leave it up for a couple of minutes. Now, Alison, do you reckon this is going to be a surprising number for you, or do you reckon there'll be quite a few who are unsure about if they've received bullying at work?
Look, I'm expecting that there will be a lot of people that will say yes, and perhaps some that are unsure, but I expect definitely more yeses than no's, and probably some unsures.
It's going to be quite unsurprising. Yeah, so as we can see right now, about 88% of you have said yes. So we'll leave it up for another minute before we close it up. And I think that's quite overwhelming. We've got 92. Someone's just asked a little question. All right, now if it's still echoing, just let me know. Hopefully you're receiving clear audio. All right, so now I'm going to close the poll. All right, so we've closed up with 88% of you saying you have experienced bullying at the workplace, yet 6% of you have said you're unsure. So hopefully as we go through this webinar, it will be a little bit clearer for you guys, and hopefully the tools that we've created will assist you as HSRs working with your DWG to keep your employer accountable to managing the bullying risks at your workplace. So bullying isn't something that just happens in school playgrounds, of course, and given the 88% of you have experienced it, it's quite clear that it makes the daily lives of a lot of workers quite intolerable. But bullying occurs in many workplaces, and the results from various polls show that around 50% of workers have been bullied, threatened, harassed, or abused at work. So bullying can be a threat to physical well-being, and it can make life at work quite miserable. And it can result in physical injury or health problems due to the stress. So not only is it a health and safety issue, but it affects the productivity and effectiveness of workplaces. So it becomes quite a serious problem. Now, the risk of bullying is minimized in workplaces where everyone's treated with dignity and respect. And bullying, we understand it as the misuse of power of an individual or group, usually derived from their position, seniority, physical attributes, gender, race, nationality, and it's against other people or co-employees when it's occurring at the workplace. Now, the previous definition of bullying in the WorkSafe Victoria Guide Preventing and Responding to Bullying at Work used to be workplace bullying is a repeated, unreasonable behaviour directed towards a worker or group of workers that creates a risk to health and safety. Now, In 2012, however, WorkSafe replaced this guide with the Workplace Bullying Prevention and Response Guide. Now, the more recent guide has a different definition, which is less clear and we believe less useful. It is also not as consistent with the nationally agreed definition of bullying. Now, this new publication states the definition of bullying to be: workplace bullying is characterized by persistent and repeated negative behavior directed at an employee that creates a risk to health and safety. Now, unions and employer organisations are seeking a review of this definition. Hopefully that change will happen soon. But the following types of behaviours, where repeated or occurring as part of a pattern of behaviour, would be considered bullying. So these include verbal abuse, excluding or isolating employees, psychological harassment, assigning meaningless tasks unrelated to the job, so quite undermining, giving employees impossible assignments, deliberately changing work rosters to inconvenience certain employees, or deliberately withholding information that might be vital for effective work performance. Cyberbullying, of course, is quite apparent, using social network sites particularly. But of course, this list is not exhaustive, and other factors which may contribute to the risk of bullying include organisational changes, workforce characteristics, workplace relationships, and of course, work systems. So Alison, is there a difference between bullying and harassment?
There certainly is, and I think one of the difficulties in this area is that the terms bullying and harassment are often used interchangeably. So basically, it makes it really hard to understand. We hear the terms used in the media are not necessarily in line with the legal definitions that apply.
Yeah.
So we've spoken a bit about the definition of bullying, but harassment, however, involves unwelcome behaviour that intimidates, offends, or humiliates a person because of a particular personal characteristic, such as race, age, gender, disability, religion, or sexuality. Mm-hmm. So they're basically the protected attributes in the Equal Opportunity Act and other discrimination legislation. So harassment is actually more in line with discrimination than what it is bullying. Yeah. However, we so often hear bullying and harassment as one. Yeah. And the difficulty then becomes when people use incorrect language, say in a grievance, and I've seen this occur where someone has consistently used the term harassment, an investigation has occurred, and before it even begins, the fact that a protected attribute hasn't been identified makes that claim sort of go nowhere to begin with, which is a problem. Yeah. And of course, the way we use harassment in everyday language, I mean, you know, we think of it more in the context of someone pestering another with a million phone calls or, you know, a million emails about the same thing. You sort of think of that as harassment in everyday language, whereas in that example, there is no actual connection to a protected attribute. So it actually isn't harassment. So the distinction is quite clear and not well understood out there.
So yeah, it's important to not see the two as interchangeable and understand the difference between the two, especially if you are trying to speak to your HSR about it, or if as a HSR you are trying to help one of the members of your DWG.
And just another thing on that can be difficult is I've seen as many policies, workplace policies, with an incorrect definition as I have as a correct one. So that complicates things even further, unfortunately.
So yeah, workplace is not getting it right either. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Oh, I think we've gone back. There we go. All
right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what isn't bullying. And one of the quite significant things that can be misunderstood is this notion of reasonable management action, because reasonable management action carried out in a fair or reasonable way isn't bullying. And some examples of this would be setting performance goals, standards, deadlines, allocating work to a worker, rostering and allocating work hours, transferring a worker, deciding not to select someone for promotion, telling a worker about unsatisfactory work performance or inappropriate behaviour, implementing organisational change, performance management, constructive feedback, and downsizing. All of these things may well be reasonable management action. However, it needs to be remembered that it must be carried out in a reasonable manner. If these things are done in an unfair way or unreasonable manner, they may in fact form part of a bullying complaint.
Okay. Now, do you, I mean, in your work experience, do you have any examples of common cases that have come forward that don't classify as bullying?
Yeah, I think the two most significant examples would be, the first would be tied to this idea of management action. And I think it's human nature to get on the defensive a bit when our work performance is called into question. People might not have insight or not believe that there is any reason for it to be going through some kind of performance management process. But sometimes, you know, if someone else objective reviews that, it can actually make sense. One quite stark example that I have seen in the industry with which I work and represent, being nursing and midwifery, is, and I have had it occur where a member has made a medication error, has admitted making a medication error, and so a performance management process may follow, and they think that process is unfair and that is bullying. But we would suggest that in that context, provided it's done in an appropriate fashion, that it isn't actually bullying. A further different type of example that I often see that I don't think is bullying is what I would classify as workplace incivility. So where people are perhaps a bit rude, not real friendly. And that probably isn't bullying, but people can perceive sort of workplace rudeness, or if people are a bit abrupt, that type of mannerism or behaviour might be bullying.
So if they're not, if cases can't be considered bullying, is anything that can be done for those people experiencing what they have thought to be bullying, and it's become quite apparent that it doesn't meet those definitions?
Yeah, sure. And I think, look, quite often if someone thinks they're being bullied, even if it doesn't meet the various definitions that apply, the very fact that someone feels bullied or perceives that they're being bullied means that it's likely that there's something going on in the workplace that could be improved or that could need attention. Sometimes, for example, management action, while it might not be unreasonable, isn't done real well. And that process, you know, things could be a bit better. And similarly, I mean, sometimes those workplace incivilities, rudeness can escalate, I guess, into exclusion. So I think sometimes nipping those behaviours in the bud at an earlier stage can be quite effective.
Before it becomes exacerbated.
Absolutely. But at the same time, premature labelling of things as bullying or harassment or discrimination isn't helpful either. It's important that we only use these terms in the right context.
Don't overuse them. All right, now before we continue on, I'm just gonna let everyone know, just because we've had someone inquire about a bit of an echo feed. As mentioned earlier, I will be sending out a recording of this webinar as well as the PowerPoint slides from the webinar, so you'll be able to read out any of the content that you may miss. All right, so let's get back to it and I'll continue on. So who is at risk? So anyone can be bullied, but in the vast majority of cases, bullying is carried out by a person in authority, while stress and ill health becomes part of the employee's daily life. So casual employees, part-time workers, and those employed on individual contracts are generally more vulnerable to bullying because they are less likely to complain. And others at risk of bullying at work include young workers, apprentices or trainees, injured workers, culturally and linguistically diverse workers, and minority workers due to their ethnicity, disability, gender, or sexual preference. So what are the health effects of bullying? Well, for the worker, stress and ill health can become part of the daily life, but those symptoms can include anxiety, headaches, nausea, ulcers, sleeplessness, high blood pressure, loss of self-confidence, thoughts of suicide or suicidal ideations, reliance on unhealthy stress relievers such as alcohol or drugs. So these are quite common, and they can be indicators of other things, but they usually are some of the symptoms from bullying. Now, of course, there are wider workplace effects, and so bullying can be recognised as a major cause of stress in the workplace by law, and the stress must be dealt with in the same way as any other health and safety hazard. So employers who fail to tackle bullying can pay a high price. So for example, lost time because staff are affected by stress and ill health, lost incentive because work morale is low, reduced work output and the quality of work, and a loss of resources because people who are trained and experienced leave the organisation. And lastly, it could create adverse media attention, i.e. some of the cases that were happening with Lord Mayor Robert Dole, for example. All right. So bullying is a workplace hazard. So it's an unacceptable behaviour, and everyone has the right to be treated with dignity and respect at work, of course. Now, bullying is an OHS issue that employers must address and manage, and the employer has a duty to provide and maintain a safe and healthy working environment, including a safe and healthy workplace and systems of work, which must include the prevention of bullying by the reduction of risk factors, which increase the likelihood of bullying. The employer must also monitor the workplace, monitor the health of employees, and consult with the HSR, and with employees on the identification, assessment, and control of risks. So some uncontrolled risks at the workplace which increase the likelihood of bullying can include a lack of transparency in management and decision-making processes, which can affect the staff. It could be perceptions of poor morale and poor management practices, a high proportion of staff on casual or short-term employment arrangements, and a number of staff facing limited or no career paths. The list goes on to include the perceived lack of leadership or direction, lack of respect between staff, a perception that the culture discourages reporting or the making of complaints about workplace bullying, and a lack of clarity of roles and responsibilities, which creates friction and mistrust, and that lack of communication can create a lot of frustration, and that can include lack of regular meetings or not receiving information in a timely manner. So this list of risk factors highlights the link between structural employment arrangements and the risk of bullying behaviours. And in the view of unions, the growth of insecure work, especially for the lower paid, is a possible contributing factor to the increasing prevalence of bullying due to the uneven relations of power that this creates. So I'm just going to quickly refer you guys to one of the handouts. Now this one is the workplace bullying risk assessment that we've done up. So just give me a moment while I change the screens up so you can have a look at this. Okay. Now, you guys should be able to see the workplace bullying risk assessment that we've done up onto your screen. And as I mentioned before, if you just click the link on your handout, it will download automatically to your desktop. So this is quite a useful risk assessment for HSRs to use. And it makes you go through organizational changes and leadership or management styles, and then to keep going and trying to check out what your work systems are, and how they may be contributing to the risk of bullying in your workplace's design. So I do recommend that you guys, if you can, download this and print this out and keep it at your workplace, because it's a good way to see the level of risk that might be apparent at your workplace. All right. Anything else? Did you want to add to that at all? No? All right. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. So what can employers do? Now, they can respond in a timely manner to allegations of bullying, treating both the complainant and respondent with empathy, maintaining confidentiality, and arranging a discussion or mediation between the parties. Employers can continue to monitor the well-being of both parties and provide support throughout the process, apply flexible workplace arrangements, including clarification on duties and responsibilities, introduce reasonable adjustments to the workplace where required, report notifiable incidents of bullying to WorkSafe, and they should take into account when assessing if disciplinary action is actually quite necessary. Now, the principles of natural justice should be followed in all formal investigations, and these principles are designed to protect all parties. So that includes the employee who is alleged to have committed the bullying should be treated as innocent unless the allegations are provided to be true. The allegations should be investigated promptly. All allegations need to be put to the person they are made against. The person the allegations are made against must be given a chance to explain their version of events. And if the complaint is upheld in any disciplinary action that is to be taken, needs to be commensurate with the seriousness of the matter. And of course, the right of appeal should be explained. Now, Alison, from your experience, what is the most common hazard or uncontrolled risk in the workplace that leads to bullying, or one of?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the most significant ones we see, and it relates back to this idea of reasonable management action, is what I would call poor leadership styles. And in that, this can occur when managers are promoted to various roles where they might be brilliant technically or brilliant clinicians in nursing, for example. So they might be the most fantastic nurse on the floor, and then they're promoted into a position where they're suddenly managing their former sort of colleagues at the same level. But what can often happen is they're not actually provided with appropriate education and training on how to actually manage. Okay, so they're not taught how to provide feedback, how to write a disciplinary letter, how to have conversations with their staff about issues that are going on. So what we can see happen is, and you know, despite people's best intentions, they performance manage in a way that isn't great. Which can then escalate into significant problems in the workplace. So one of the most significant risk controls in this space is that organisations, employers need to be properly training and educating their managers on how to people manage. And selecting people not just because they're great at the technical aspect of the job, but choosing people who are great people, who have those sort of soft skills. And I think that is one risk control that really should be more commonly considered and looked at.
Yeah, you're right, because I feel like a lot of those interpersonal skills get truncated for that technical experience, because that does shine, but it doesn't necessarily reflect or mean that they will be a good manager.
That's right. Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, so let's move on. So Alison, what does the law say about bullying?
Okay, so there is no specific occupational health and safety regulation that covers bullying or makes it specifically illegal for bullying to occur. It's not specifically addressed in either the OC health and safety regulations or codes. However, under Section 21 of the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act, employers have a general duty to provide and maintain for employees, as far as practicable, a working environment that is safe and without risks to health. While the duty of care of employers under the 2004 Act is more or less the same as what it was under the 1985 Act, the definition of health was amended. So health now includes psychological health. So this means that the employer must now address workplace hazards such as bullying, stress, and fatigue. So while there are no regulations, WorkSafe Victoria has guidance on bullying, which is an acknowledged and serious hazard in workplaces. As mentioned before, in 2012, WorkSafe replaced its previous guide to Workplace Bullying Prevention and Response. And WorkSafe has a special unit, the Psychosocial Practice Unit, which has inspectors who investigate claims of bullying. Consultation is an essential part of the risk management approach to the prevention of bullying at work.
Now, I'm just going to apologise for any noise you might be hearing in the background. So just if you can keep on going, and as I mentioned, we will have a copy of the presentation available for you guys to go back through. But yeah, continue on.
Okay, so an employer must consult so far as is reasonably practicable with HSRs and employees, and consultation must occur when an employer is identifying or assessing bullying risks, makes decisions about measures to control bullying risks, makes decisions about developing and implementing procedures for resolving complaints, makes decisions about providing information and training on bullying prevention, reviews the existing policy and or procedures on bullying prevention, reviews signs of bullying affecting the health and safety of employees, and reviews and assesses proposed changes to the way that work is performed. And in Victoria, in addition, injury or ill health due to the workplace bullying may become the subject of work cover claims or common law actions. Some forms of bullying may constitute assault and could be an offence under the Crimes Act. And in legislation which extends the criminal offence of stalking, known as Brodie's Law, introduced in June 2011, bullying may be a crime. Victoria introduced Brodie's Law following the tragic suicide of Brodie Panlock. However, the law does not and cannot address the majority of bullying behaviours, nor the workplace risk factors which can lead to such behaviours. While the campaign and the law has highlighted the problem of workplace bullying, the focus of the law is on the individual and is linked to stalking, which rightly should be addressed through the criminal justice system. This means that only the most severe cases of workplace bullying fall under these provisions, and those cases perceived as less serious may go unaddressed. This is compounded by the onerous criminal standard of proof of beyond reasonable doubt. And in terms of federal law, since 1st of January 2014, if a worker is being bullied at work, they have been able to apply to the Fair Work Commission for an order to stop the bullying. The changes to the legislation mean that the Commission must respond to such an application within 2 weeks after it is received. Orders may be anything from directing the bullying behaviour to stop to ensuring that all staff undergo anti-bullying training. If the person who is the bully does not follow the orders, they may face very significant fines. And the changes are designed to make sure workers who are bullied have access to fair, fast and effective mechanisms that will resolve the situation. Importantly, however, the Fair Work Commission cannot award financial compensation to someone who has been bullied. The Fair Work Act general protections provisions may also be relevant. This is particularly so if a person experiences adverse action because they have made a bullying complaint or exercised a workplace right. Under Section 342 of the Fair Work Act, an employer takes adverse action against an employee if the employer dismisses the employee, injures the employee in his or her employment, alters the position of the employee to the employee's prejudice, or discriminates between the employee and another employee of the employer. And there's also discrimination laws that could be relevant and useful if the behaviours are related to a particular characteristic which is outlawed under discrimination legislation, such as sex, sexuality, race.
Yeah, of course.
And if wanting to consider taking legal action or various options through different pieces of legislation, we recommend that you contact your union for specific advice.
Always good advice to contact your union first. Okay, so I kind of mentioned this when advertising the webinar, that in February, Trades will establish a bullying working group with our affiliated unions. And the purpose of this group is to create a draft regulations and draft code of practice, because there isn't a code of practice that exists in Australia for bullying. So to accompany the draft regulations and code of practice, we're also creating a kit with handy resources and tools for HSRs, delegates and organisers to use at their workplace to assist in preventing and responding to workplace bullying. So tonight we are presenting for the first time what our draft regulations look like, and we would love your feedback. So if you just bear with me for a moment, I'll bring this up on the screen again. All right, now everyone should be able to see a copy of these bullying regulations. And I mentioned again, if you go into your handouts, you'll see the title Bullying Regulations First Draft. So just click on that link and open it up. But if anyone would like to, I'll give you a couple of minutes to go through it. But if you'd like to send in some feedback now or email it in to us, we'd obviously appreciate that, because we want to make this reflect the issues common to HSRs, or that HSRs are seeing in their DWD a lot. So this is all welcome. All right, now let me just check. Now I've seen a lot of people post in general questions that we'll get to at the end of this webinar. Now, what do you at the moment, Alison, what do you think of these regulations that we've drafted?
Yeah, look, I think they're quite comprehensive, and I suppose I'm a part of this this working group. And I guess one thing to note is we're still very much at the early stage. Yes. This is what we put together at the end of, I think, what was our second meeting. So they're at this early stage. I'm just having another little look now.
Because one thing that we've done here is try and create a definition of bullying, the one that we do agree with, but also a definition of a bullying incident, so that for people that have experienced one case of bullying, that we understand that it's still unreasonable behaviour, that if it was repeated, it would still constitute what we've defined bullying to be. Yep. I think that's really important, yeah.
It absolutely is, because the reality is if there's one incident that would, if repeated, was bullying, it still should be dealt with. Now, it doesn't mean that you start labelling it as bullying.
No.
But it, you know, if we want to talk about prevention and stopping things escalating to a point where they become bullying, then it still should be dealt with.
Exactly.
So I really like the idea of acknowledging a single incident of what would otherwise be bullying. Because, you know, the whole aim is to stop it from getting to that point.
Because we want it to focus on prevention.
Absolutely.
Like we want to help responding to it, but if we didn't, if we could prevent in the first place, there would be no need to respond.
Yeah. I think looking at point 3, the
risk assessment.
Yeah, the risk assessment and the risk factors. I know that that's sort of the start of the list. I've got a few more that I want to include. So I haven't actually done my feedback yet, so I will be.
But other members echoed that too.
So that's sort of just the start of the list, because there's heaps and heaps of recognised risk factors that aren't just things that people have thought of and come up with. There's been a lot of very significant research that's come out, in particular that's come out of the out of South Australia, that has actually proven that these various risk factors contribute to bullying. It's very significant.
Because I think what we're particularly aiming for here is that if we broke the regulations up between the prevention and responding issues, we would be able to tackle everything on both ends. So again, if you guys can think of any other bullying risk assessments that you think you would like to see in these regulations. So just to remember, we will, when we create these regulations and these draft codes, we're going to be presenting these to government. So we're going to try to make them taken into law and actually created as a work safe code. So it's quite exciting work that we're doing. But yeah, take it some time, download it at home, go through it, send us in any feedback that you like. But I must say it's a pretty exciting thing.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's just hit back onto the presentation. All right. Now, what we wanted to go through after these regulations, now let me just see if, hang on one moment. Okay, so, okay, let's go back. Some people have sent in some questions, so let me just go back to the regulations. Now, one of the questions was, or feedback for the regs is, this is from Visalia. The definition perhaps should also include acts or verbal comments that could mentally hurt, or practices that isolate a person in the workplace, the assertion of power through aggression and unreasonable actions of managers. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I actually think that some of those things listed there would be unreasonable or would be negative if we're talking about the current definition used in Victoria. So I actually think that those things could well actually
that's great
be part of bullying anyway. They're really good examples there.
Great. I'm going to take note of these after the webinar. Thank you. Lucy said it looks good. And Mick has commented that point 3, the risk assessment should also include HSRs for their respective workplaces. Now, I think that was something that we were discussing when we were drafting up these regs, because I think we wanted to kind of show that if there isn't a HSR, then that creates its own risk in itself. So I mean, if this is what you're implying, Mick, I'd love to get a bit more of an explanation. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about that as well, Alison?
Yeah, I'm interested in a bit more detail. So,
and Darren has asked what date is on the draft. Actually, I don't know if we put a date on the draft, but we did create it just over a month ago, so it's very fresh and recent. And as I mentioned, we'll be going through the feedback again at the next meeting. But of course, we'd love your feedback beforehand so we can take it into the next meeting. Okay. Now, Mick has commented again about point 6. So let me just scroll down. So point 6 comes under the responding to bullying. Okay, so this was, okay, so Mick is just clarifying his point on the HSRs. Bullying investigation should also involve HSRs through the process, as I find that the employer is never impartial and the investigators are always on the employer's side. Obviously, the employer is paying the bills, so HSR should be involved. Okay. Yeah, all right, that makes sense. Do you have any, what are your feelings with that?
I think what Mick's getting at is that usually the person doing the investigation is employed by the organisation, and if there is an external investigator appointed, it's the workplace paying for the external investigation, which can give the, I guess, impression and the absolute feeling of a lack of impartiality.
Okay.
I'm going to make a comment, though, that may not always be, may not be agreed by everyone, but I actually have a bit of a concern about HSRs getting too involved in the actual nitty-gritty details.
It's not their responsibility.
No, it's not their responsibility, and it can also cause problems in the workplace. When HSRs do get involved in the absolute nitty-gritty of complaints. I see the role of the HSR in this space more in terms of ensuring the process is proper and that policies and procedures, being involved in consultation from that angle. But I don't often encourage HSRs to be attending as support people, not witnesses, sorry, but as support people investigations, because I think that can be quite a compromised position for someone within the workplace who may be working with all parties involved.
So
but I know I'm not. I know not everyone is in agreement with that view. That is my opinion, and certainly the view of.
Definitely, because I read your comment, Mick, as part of an investigation of WorkSafe being in there. And in that case, I mean, the HSR is able to assist if a workplace inspector comes in.
Yes.
But you're referring to specifically HR at the workplace, not from WorkSafe coming in. So yeah, I would.
Oh, okay. I may have misinterpreted the question. I'm sorry if that's the case. Yeah.
But I totally agree with Yasin, because it's not the responsibility of the HSR to do that. And you're right, it is a conflict of interest for them, because they're representing what if both of the parties are from the DWG? What are they? Yeah. No, you're right. Okay, we'll move on. Abby has commented that her bullying incident had other staff involved. My bully tried to encourage others to tell me that I was doing the wrong thing. Maybe this could be included. To tell me that I was doing the wrong thing. So I'm not too sure what part of it you would like to see included. Maybe a bit more clarification from you on that, Abby. And I'll quickly move on to Sue's question before we proceed with the presentation. Sue says that impartiality is vital. Yeah, my workplace had an investigation and 2 people were selected by the employer, so impartiality definitely.
I'm interested to know if when it says 2 people were selected by the employer, if that question is referring to the investigators, or are we referring to witnesses, people that were interviewed as part of it?
Yeah. So maybe clarification from you, Sue, who those two people were. Were they part of the investigation, or were they witnesses for the investigation?
There's another comment there, no case was proven. And just another little bit of my opinion on this. And it's a very difficult space, this bullying world, because just because something isn't substantiated or isn't proving doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It just means that there wasn't the evidence that it could be proven. And that's something that's very difficult, I think, to understand and accept too. So for example, if you've got a conversation behind closed doors, the sort of he said, she said scenario, unless the person admits to making the comments or doing the whatever was done, it can't be proven. Now, I have had 2 occasions now in working in this space for 5.5 years where the alleged bully has freely admitted to the behind closed door conversations, but chances are people aren't going to do that.
No.
So it's so important to have supporting evidence, witnesses, write notes as soon as stuff. Absolutely, that stuff is vital. Absolutely crucial.
So we'll get to a couple more tips later on, but I'm just going to quickly go back to the email before we start answering any other general questions. Sorry, go back to the presentation before we start answering general questions. All right. Okay, so we'll just move on quickly to a bullying action plan for HSR. So HSRs have the right to represent workers in raising issues, of course, monitoring measures taken by the employer, investigating complaints from co-workers, and inquiring into anything that appears to be a risk to the health and safety of workers. So here's a little bit of an action plan we've put together. All right, now the first one is for HSRs to consult with your DWG. So consult with them to discuss the issue and create awareness of this. And this is really important because if it is your DWG affected by it, you want their input. The second step would be to carry out surveys to see if bullying may be a problem in your workplace. So regardless of whether anyone has come forward to you or not, this is quite a good way to understand through an anonymous way if people have been facing bullying or appear to be facing bullying at their workplace. The third step would be to advise members to collect evidence, keep a diary of any incidents, just as Alison was pointing out. No matter how small you may think it may be, just date it, write it down, keep it as a log. Fourth, we would go on to say developing a policy together with management. So this policy should include a definition of bullying, the possible effects that it has, that it's not tolerated by the organisation, and what reporting and investigation procedures this may have with it. So this could be a task for the joint OHS committee if there isn't one in place, and if there is one in place, and of course if there isn't, then consider requesting your employee to do so. Again, your rights under the Act. And the likelihood of bullying in a workplace where there is consideration and respect is of course going to be much lower in a workplace where there is little respect. All right, now the fifth would be to consult. Now consult with your employer to ensure that adequate training, information and instruction is provided at the workplace to all workers, supervisors and health and safety reps. And remember, it's part of the employer's obligation to provide that adequate training, so you can request this. Step 6 would be to encourage your members to report all incidents of bullying and harassment. Step 7, to keep your eyes open for any warning signs that bullying is happening in your workplace. And again, use our bullying risk assessment checklist that I went through before. Remember, you can download that under the handouts section. And last but not least, to contact your union for further advice or information. Now, as I mentioned before, the most effective way to stop bullying before it starts is to create a climate or culture within an organisation that makes it very, very clear that bullying is unacceptable and makes it clear to those would-be bullies that certain behaviours are out of bounds. Now, a specific policy intended to prevent or stop bullying should include a statement of commitment by all levels of management, which defines bullying and makes it clear that it is unacceptable in the organisation and will not be tolerated. It must be jointly developed and agreed by management, the health and safety rep, or representatives, relevant unions, and the Health and Safety Committee if one has been established. It should guarantee confidentiality and rapid resolution of issues, and it should provide for regular monitoring and review. So I'm going to refer you guys to another one of our handouts. Now, this one is the bullying policy checklist. And let me just quickly switch screens so you guys can have a look at what this has. Now, again, this is a really good one for you guys to download and keep at work because it goes through what your bullying policy should include, and it also goes through what the complaint handling procedure should include for your workplace. So this is a good indicator of whether your current policy or complaint handling procedure is sufficient, or what you would need to do to get one established through your Health and Safety Committee. So again, click this link and on your handout section, and this will download and you can keep this as a copy for yourself. Now, do you have any other advice for HSRs, Alison?
Yeah, sure. As I sort of indicated earlier, to really provide support around the process with workers who say they're experiencing bullying and help them navigate the process. But as I said, not get too involved in the nitty-gritty. But sort of ensure that procedurally things are going right, going the right way. And also encourage union involvement where possible.
Particularly when you have some great unions that have dedicated bullying OHS officers like Alison. You want to go straight to your union because we're here to help you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, let's get back to the presentation and we'll leave the last 10 or so minutes for your questions. So please send in some now if you haven't already. But let's just open up the questions chat box and see what you guys have sent in.
I might just fill a bit of space while we have a look at the questions, if that's all right. Just a couple of my observations in this space and just some things that I find to be interesting. I think with our sort of education and training about bullying that goes on in workplaces, it can sometimes be presented in a bit of a negative light. You shouldn't behave like this. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And people don't often look at that and think, oh yeah, I'm a bully. I'm doing these things. I need to change. But I wonder if in some instances, flipping the language around and talking about what type of behaviours are expected can be quite a useful tool in terms of, I guess, working on the culture and the overall vibe of the workplace. And just another thing that's interesting and how employers often perceive this, because of course, as you know, union people, we see this as an OHS issue. It's about the overall system. It's about the processes that the employer has in place. But so often, and I see it happen time and time again, you'll see employers think of it as, you know, just a bit of a personality clash between two people, or, you know, so-and-so is a little bit sensitive.
So common,
So I just, you know, there's a lot more understanding now about that sort of broader systems perspective and those risk factors, and that is a good thing. But
and that's like, you know, with the risk assessment that we have available for you, it separates it between those interpersonal relationships and between the work systems and design, and that's really important. So it's quite important that both of those are addressed, because if it's not the one, it may be the other, or it may be both combined. Okay, so let's get into some of these questions. So again, please feel free to send them in through the questions box. Okay, we have quite a few sent in. All right, so that was just a bit more clarification on where you guys can download the risk assessment form. So again, just head to the handouts tab on your control panel and just click the blue hyperlink and it will download for you. If you're still unsure how to do that, as I mentioned, I will be sending out a copy of the recording and the risk assessment checklist and the bullying policy and procedures checklist. Okay, now Abby has asked, what is the process that should occur when a bullying claim is made in your workplace? I work at a school. Now,
I think the first thing to do is to actually look at the workplace policy and procedure, because all workplaces should have a policy and procedure that should very clearly articulate all of these things on this fantastic checklist. So it should actually talk about how the complaint should be submitted. Sometimes organisations will have a specific form that you should fill out. There might be specific questions you need to fill out, and it's always very wise to actually do it the way it's said in the policy. And the reason I say that is this: if we then want to call out an employer for not following their policy, it's good to have followed it yourself to begin with, if that makes sense. So quite often when I go through investigations and how complaints have been dealt with at the end of the investigation, when perhaps the outcome isn't what was hoped for, I unpick it with a fine-tooth comb as much as I can in terms of the information that we're given, to really go through, you know, did it occur as it was meant to in the policy and process? So absolutely referring to that process. But just in terms of some, you know, general principles that should be followed, the basic principles of natural justice, which we referenced before. So, you know, the impartial investigation, no one's assumed guilty, and all those types of things, a timely manner, the opportunity for a support person, all those things.
And of course, I'd be like not too sure which union you're with, but give the AU or the IU a call, and they'll be able to assist you, especially if you, you know, if you have your policy in your enterprise bargaining agreement or whatever, they can assist you with that. And if not, consider, you know, if you find that your workplace bullying procedures aren't adequate enough, again, consider trying to implement better ones through your health and safety committee. Okay. Now, this question sent in: is there somewhere above your boss and below WorkSafe to report or get advice for bullying in the workplace?
Okay, so that's of course going to depend on the context of the organisation, but in this, because of the nature of the way the question is phrased, I'm going to assume that there's the boss and that's sort of it. Just by the way that's phrased, I'm assuming there's no boss of the boss, for example. Look, in some organisations there might be a board, and we've had to, or I've known of complaints that have actually gone to the chairman of a board, for example. It really depends on the nature of the actual workplace. It's a bit difficult to answer that with specificity without understanding the nature of that workplace.
But of course, in general, if you are trying to get advice for bullying in the workplace, we recommend you contacting your union, because they're going to know. Okay. Now, we've had that comment come in earlier. Now, David's kind of echoed what Alison was saying before. HSRs should be available as support, not as an investigator. They can create issues for the HSR if they find it in favour of the employer. So I guess it kind of depends what kind of support you understand the HSR to be providing. You want them to be making sure that the procedures are followed and the employer is being accountable to their duties. But again, we must stress that it is not the responsibility and it's not the duty for the HSR to have to facilitate most of this. It's good for them to make sure the proper procedures are followed according to the Act. But I think, Alison, you were saying they shouldn't be there as a support person, because if they are representing the whole DWG, that could be a conflict of interest. Okay, now, Vasalia has mentioned the investigation report is not currently provided on account of privacy. Need to provide a copy of the full report to the person making the complaint, not the summary report.
Yeah, this is a good question.
Okay.
And it's difficult, and what you get might be a very basic summary, or in some circumstances, the person who's made the complaint might be in receipt of the full report. Whether a person is entitled to the full report is a complex legal question, and notions of privilege come into play. So it's a difficult space, and there's been various decisions where that have suggested that it isn't possible to get the full report in some circumstances.
Right.
But I do agree, in a perfect world, yeah, you'd get the full report and then you can properly look at, you know, exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But I suppose then there's the flip side too. I mean, witnesses of bullying are in a bit of a tricky space, and I'd like to think that they would all speak up and tell the truth. But I know of many, many circumstances where people will conveniently forget, or I can't recall, or almost deny witnessing things that they did witness because they don't want to be embroiled in the whole thing. So if their statement is then not confidential, from that perspective, I do see it as a bit of a problem. But what I will do is I will also always ask many, many questions if we think something's a bit amiss. So actually ask in writing who was interviewed. Or was this person interviewed? Was this person interviewed? Because in putting a complaint in, it's imperative that witnesses are named. Because otherwise, how can it be properly investigated? Just can I talk a bit about complaints?
Go.
Generally, just a bit of advice that I provide members, and I spend a lot of time reviewing complaints and providing feedback as well. If someone's wanting to put in a bullying complaint, what you're trying to do is provide something that can satisfy the definition of bullying. So you need to think of the various elements and make sure that what's on paper can meet that requirement. If you're going to call it bullying, if you don't want to call it bullying, or if you prefer to put in a general grievance, which is something I regularly recommend if I don't think it meets the threshold of bullying. If you're going to put it in as bullying, it's essential that the elements are met, but that the most significant incidents where there's evidence and witnesses, that they're the ones that you include. And that it is very factual and non-emotive. And specifies dates and times. And it's a really tough task. If someone is experiencing these types of negative or unreasonable behaviours, putting something down on paper is very difficult. And it usually takes several drafts to get a complaint fit to be submitted. So I strongly encourage anyone who wants to submit a complaint to seek advice on it, because pretty much everyone I've seen has been quite inappropriate for submission at first instance, because they're often written in quite emotive. And of course it is, because we're talking about emotive, very emotional and challenging situation. However, a complaint can be strengthened by removing that emotion, keeping it factual, keeping it not 20 pages long, and actually removing some of the less significant instances, because in my opinion, including them can actually weaken the whole complaint. You just stick to 5 or 6 really good incidents where they've got that supportive evidence. That gives the overall complaint a lot more weight.
If that makes sense. Tangential.
But I absolutely recognise, and I say this to members when I'm working with them, that hearing that feedback isn't necessarily what you want to hear.
No.
And my advice and my feedback is exactly that, my advice and my feedback. And you know, people are welcome, of course, to put any complaint in that they see fit.
That's
can be
really
hard to let go of some things.
But that's excellent advice if you wanted to go through. Now I know we're running a bit out of time, but if it's okay with everyone, I might just extend the session to answer one or two more questions, because we've had quite a few sent in. Now this question was sent in by Irene, asking, what can a HSR do when they are bullied by management or the OHS management nominee? Example, excluded from group emails that are related to OHS issues, or not replying to the HSR emails. What would you recommend, Alison?
Well, I think you need to have a good look at it all and see whether it sort of does meet the definition of bullying, but certainly raising it as an issue. And this also possibly presents a little bit of another bit of a legal avenue too, if it sort of falls into the realm of adverse action because the person is an HSR as well. If they're being treated adversely because of that brings us into a slightly different area as well. But I'd absolutely recommend reporting that, because that just like if that was occurring not in the context of an HSR, it would still be a problem.
Yeah, because I wonder if, I mean, to me it also sounds like, you know, there's that section in the Act that says HSRs should not be treated unfairly or face discrimination in their position.
Yeah.
It also sounds to me as though they're not actually properly consulting with you for certain issues, and that's quite a few contraventions of the Act as well. So, I mean, if it's not going to go through the other procedures of filing the incident that it is bullying, if it does meet that definition, you know, don't be afraid to use the Act as well.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, we might answer one more good question. Let's find a nice one here. See any good ones?
There's a good comment by Sue, advising employers to take a witness to any meeting, which may include a difficult discussion with the boss. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Have them there, not to talk, but to take notes, so you've got someone there. That's very, very good advice.
Okay. Now, okay, sorry, I'm just trying to go through because there's quite a few questions.
And we haven't really done them in order, have we?
No. So, bear with us for a second. All right, is there any good ones that you're seeing?
Lots of comments.
Yeah, lots of good comments, guys. Now, Darren asked if they're mandated, so the employer must include them in the workplace policy.
No, there's nothing in legislation. There's the WorkSafe guidance, which was the 2012 one, and that does talk a little bit about what should be in a policy, but the guidance is not, it's guidance, it's not actually mandated, it's not law. And I guess that's why we're looking at the regulations and the code, because they have a lot more weight.
Yeah. I mean, the regulations are considered the law just as equally as anything in the Act, and that's why we want to get something in there. Now I'll leave it to the last point now. Abby asked if there's a good bullying policy template to use. Because it looks like her workplace doesn't have one. Now, I would recommend, first of all, using the checklist that we have provided, the bullying policy and procedure checklist. But for your convenience, I'll find something out that there's plenty of good things out there, and I can link that to you guys in the email when I send out this webinar. But I think now we're just about nearly 5 minutes over, so I'll leave it at that. But please remember to send in any questions that you might have from tonight to Ask Renata. The link is on your screen. But we'll wrap this up now. And I'd just like to say that on behalf of everyone at the hall, we'd like to thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, of course, Alison, for being here tonight to assist. We'll see you guys next time. All right, keep well.